For once, we're going to leave the realm of speculation and theoreticals and potential outside canon sources talking about inside canon stuff to talk about something speculative again, but based off entirely in-game content. And why I sided with the Empire over the Stormcloaks. It's a very simple reason, of course, and it's using out-of-game lore and some in-game lore to explain my reasonings. The Empire is not squeaky clean. All three of them have problems, with probably the Cyrodiils being the least known about what those problems are. We know some problems with Elysia. The Elysian Order is very terrible, it's very bad, it's very puritanical, it's very tyrannical. It's not that good, but it's not Queen Elysia's fault, but it is a big stain on the Empire, the first one. The second one I don't really know too much about. And then the third one we already know about. Talos, Tiber Septim, and all of those dark deeds that happened during the conquering of Tamriel. So many things happened there. So many morally questionable things. But then we have what the Empire itself actually represents, and given what we know about the lore about the Elder Scrolls and how it has often always been man versus Mer, Lorkhan versus Ariel, since the dawn of days, and the days before days, and the days before days before days, and the days before the concept of even days existing, it has always been order versus chaos, stasis versus change, Anu versus Padme. Now, Anu versus Padme, these two forces are forces of nature. They're concepts, they're aspects, they're the yes and no of the universe, which allows the maybe to exist. So they're not necessarily good or evil. Not even Sithis and Anuiel are good or evil. They are simply concepts, forces of nature, given perceptions of themselves. It's usually their firstborns, Ariel and Lorkhan, that can be theoretically viewed as good or evil, depending upon the lens and the frame and the people looking at the story being told. What's the one thing that has changed from what we know of the ancient lore? What we know is it's usually always man versus Mer. Man usually rarely ever lives harmoniously with elven kind or beast kind. It's just a rarely occurring happenstance. It's just unheard of. Queen Elysia did something so unheard of that almost immediately Maruk and a bunch of other zealots decided to undo what she attempted to try, which is make peace between man and Mer, and have an empire where all could live within it harmoniously and cosmopolitan-like. And so the Elysian Order tried to wipe out all of elven kind out of Cyrodiil, push the Ayleids out, push them into Valenwood, into High Rock, into Morrowind, and from there we don't know what happened to them afterwards. They're probably all either dead or they've been bred into the societies from which they fled into. It's a very dark period, because these Ayleids, not all of them are good, but there were a few Ayleid clans that helped Queen Elysia take back the land of the Needs from the Heartland High Elves. These Ayleids were nice people for the most part. They helped out, and then they were given an agreement that they would be able to keep their holdings so long as they stopped the Daedra worship and all that other stuff, and it's like, great, it's a good thing to have peace between these two peoples. I am all for this. But then the Elysian Order decided to, wipe out all of the elves and go back to the status quo of man versus elf. It's almost like nature requires this. It's almost like this is a requirement for how things are to happen, is that we have to have man versus Mer. These are two opposing forces. They cannot live side by side. This is why the Eight Divines is so strange. It was a reconcilement, and it's almost a boon, a beneficial thing, that the Needs were worshipping Alien pantheons, the Aldmeri pantheon. You know, they were worshipping Aldmeri deities. Now, of course, they all had Shazar as a hidden deity in the back of their minds at all times, of course, but they praised Ariel. You know, they praised the other alien deities. They were very happy with them all and all that good stuff. Of course, the Nords would never accept any rule where Oriel was part of it. They don't like Oriel. Oriel is Alduin. So she had to make some concessions. She had to add Kine to the Eight Divines. She had to add Kine. Kine's not part of the Aldmeri pantheon. The Aldmeri and Bossmeri pantheons often worship Ifre, who's often seen as Kine's counterpart. Not the same as Kine, but a counterpart, a different person. Theoretically, it could be different people, who knows. It's all in the realm of speculation the further you go back. But she had to add Kine because the Nords love Kine, and the Shore had to be there somewhere. So she put him in plain sight, inside Akatosh. That's my theory, of course. But the Empire was originally meant to be the reconciliation between many provinces where they were not cosmopolitan. She was trying to make the land cosmopolitan, where all peoples can set aside their differences and live and achieve citizenship and all that great good stuff that we all love so much. You go into Cyrodiil and you're a high elf, you can become a citizen. You go into Cyrodiil and you're an Argonian, you can become a citizen. You go into Cyrodiil and you're a Dunmer, you can become a citizen. If you're a Khajiit, you can become a citizen, etc., etc., etc. All of these peoples, from where they come from, they're not exactly cosmopolitan. Morrowind tends to not really look too kindly upon anybody who's not a Dunmer. They pretend to enslave Argonians, and it's like, okay. And the Redguards tend to not really care for anybody who's not a Redguard, at least the Crowns don't. The Forebears are a little bit more cosmopolitan because they were more accepting of the Empire because they joined forces to take out the Crowns, and that's how Hammerfall joined the Empire. And of course, the High Rock, the Bretons there, they hate each other. And it's only natural for the Bretons to hate each other because they're both mixed bloods of man and mer, so they have to hate each other. It's almost like there's some sort of nature, divine fate that requires man and mer to hate each other. It's just impossible to reconcile. And of course, the Nords and the Altmer are the two extreme forces, the two extreme faces of man versus mer. The Argonians tend to just stick to the Argonians in Black Marsh, and not like anybody else can live there. The Khajiit tend to care for their own. So really, it's only Cyrodiil where anybody can be a citizen, where anybody can move there and become part of the Empire. And you keep your culture too, you know, it's a great thing. It's a great place. It's a great idea. It may have been born on a couple lies, it may have been making a bunch of mistakes, but it's still a hope for these people to have peace. It's a hope. And I like that hope. I do. I believe in that hope for all peoples to just set aside their differences and stop bickering with one another and just get along. You know, I hope all the peoples of Tamriel can just get along. Stop bickering. And it's like, you guys have been fighting for thousands of years. Isn't it time you just called it off? How many kalpas, if you even believe in that? Cycles of time, thousands of 4,500 years, cycles of time and time and time, and cycles of time and untime and time and untime. The dragon and the tail eating itself, the cycle, the circle, time being a circle. It's like, you guys have been fighting for so friggin' long. Isn't it time you guys aren't you sick of it? Nothing's going to change, and it's ironic that Lorcan, being an Patamic firstborn aspect of change, is unchanging in this aspect, in that Lorcan keeps fighting the elves. That's an unchanging thing. That's an Inuit thing, that he wants to keep fighting them for the exact same things, for the exact same reasons, every single Kalpok cycle. It's almost like it's unlike him. Which is why I would argue that Man and Mer getting along would be a very Patamic thing this time around. Because isn't it a wonder why Man and Mer keep fighting unchangingly? That might be an Inuit thing, and then this guy, being Patamic, starts to look at this and go, I can't really change this about myself, even though I like change. This is the one thing I can't change, but I want you to change me, so that I can not stop doing this. Lorcan could probably say this to Alicia or something, and maybe that's why Akatosh is here. Maybe that's why Akatosh is here, who is like the polar opposite of Oriel, who likes both Man and Mer. Both peoples can live happily under the banner of Akatosh. They could drop the banners of Lorcan, Shore, and Oriel and live under Akatosh, and everybody can live in peace and prosperity. That could be a great thing. Enter the Stormcloaks. They are all... Look. The original story synopsis, the original idea for Skyrim, there's a lot of scrapped content that I don't know too much about. I didn't really research all of that stuff. I just know what I played in game. And what I played in game was pretty straightforward. The Nords don't like the Empire, because the Empire is ceded to the Thalmor and outlaw Talos worship. And that's the only reason that the Nords are fighting the Imperials, is that they think the Imperials were weak when they signed the White Gold Concordant. Hammerfell thought the Empire was weak when they signed the White Gold Concordant. Hammerfell ceded from the Empire so that they could continue fighting the Thalmor, so that they didn't have to cede any of their own lands. And Skyrim is trying to cede from the Empire so that they can reestablish Talos worship without the Thalmor telling them what to do. And it is my belief that the Thalmor don't really care about Talos. They don't care about him all that much. They really don't. They think he's just a sham to begin with. And what danger is a sham to you, really? What danger is he to you? He's no danger at all. If they don't believe that a human could ever become a god, then Talos isn't a god. So Talos isn't a threat to them. So why would they outlaw Talos worship other than in a long-term gambit to cause the Empire to fracture even further? What if the Thalmor put Hammerfell's southern portions to be taken by the Dominion in anticipation that Hammerfell would leave the Empire? Because the Redguards are very good warriors. The Cyrodiils need the Redguards for their armies. And what if the Thalmor outlawed Talos worship in anticipation that Skyrim would get pissed off about this and cede from the Empire? What if those two proposals in the peace negotiations were all intended to get Skyrim and Hammerfell to cede from the Empire, so that Cyrodiil would stand alone? High Rock doesn't really have much to really help to Cyrodiil with, and High Rock without Hammerfell or Skyrim to have trade routes and all that stuff in, they're kind of isolated from one another. How are you going to get anything from High Rock to Cyrodiil, or Cyrodiil to High Rock through the port at Anvil? Well, Anvil has to go through Somerset Waters, so you're kind of isolated. And then High Rock's basically by itself, and it's just free pickings for the Aldemir, for the Thalmor to take out High Rock and to take control of the Adamantine Tower if that's their goal. Either way, the goal, in my theory, was to isolate Cyrodiil, get rid of the two greatest human armies that Cyrodiil could amass, Hammerfell and Skyrim, by adding the two things that both provinces would never agree to. Cyrodiil doesn't really need Talos. They don't really need him. They have the Eight Divines, they have Queen Elysia, they have Pelennor Whitestrike, they have all this other stuff. Talos, Tiber Septim, they could still revere Tiber Septim as an emperor, but I don't think the Needs care that much. But the Nords, they venerate heroes, mortal heroes, as deities far more than any other nation, except for maybe Red or Hammerfell. Maybe they might, but we have in Skyrim people like Ysmir Wolfarth, who are still venerated in songs and stories. Ysgramor, who is still venerated in songs and stories. We have so many human heroes who are venerated as if they were gods. They are sung, their songs, their stories are sung, and their stories are told and retold thousands of years later. People still know who Ysmir is. People still know who Ysgramor and the 500 companions are. And there are probably many more songs that didn't get added into Skyrim, because realistically you can't really add an entire nation's history with hundreds and thousands of stories realistically. So these handful of stories and songs that did get made in represent the hundreds and thousands of other songs that would realistically still exist in Skyrim, where they venerate their fallen heroes as deities even. So to outlaw Talos, somebody who they believe is one of their own, more than likely through a lie, if you believe my previous video about the Talos conspiracy, that Talos is actually Wolfarth, and they are already worshipping Ysmir Wolfarth, so it's not like outlawing Talos is going to outlaw Ysmir. They could just go back to worshipping Ysmir Wolfarth, and it's technically the same guy, because who gives a crap about Zurin and Hjalti? It's all about Wolfarth. Wolfarth did most of the heavy lifting, if you believe the Arcturian heresy. Wolfarth and Zurin did most of the heavy lifting. Hjalti was just a snake. But either way, Skyrim seeding because of Talos is all part of the Thalmor's plan. So if you ever joined the Stormcloaks, technically you are doing the Thalmor's bidding, even though Ulfric doesn't like the Thalmor. Even though they all claim that they hate the Thalmor, they hate these guys for outlawing Talos worship and all of that stuff, you are still doing the Thalmor's bidding by fighting for the side of the Stormcloaks. You are still doing what they want. They want this civil war. They want the Empire to be busy fighting these rabble. They want Skyrim to cede from the Empire. Skyrim by itself fighting the Thalmor Empire, the Aldemari Dominion, they are going to lose. The Lords are going to lose. Especially if they don't have a Dragonborn to back them up and all that stuff. If you are backing the Stormcloaks up, arguably you could theoretically beat the Thalmor, but that's the thing with player characters. If player characters stuck around, they could do a lot of things. The hero of Kvatch could have become the next Emperor of Cyrodiil if he stuck around in the story and didn't disappear at the end of the Shivering Isles DLC. The hero of Kvatch could arguably have become the next Emperor instead of Titus Bede I. After saving the Empire and becoming the personal friend of Martin Septim, he would have the personal recommendation of Chancellor Okato and of the Blades and all of that stuff. He could have become the next Emperor. That's why he vanished. The player character is too powerful of an aspect to continue in the story. That's why the Nyr of Arene vanished. Otherwise, he could have taken over as the Hortator of Morrowind. That's why everybody vanishes. That's why they do. It's because if they stuck around, they could do some really big things in the time skips. The last Dragonborn could become the next Emperor of Cyrodiil if they wanted. They killed the last Emperor, nobody would know that, and except for the Chancellor, and of course, and he'd probably have you in his pocket until you got rid of him, if the Black Hand part is canon. And your actions in the Black Hand may not be canon, but it may be canon that the Emperor is assassinated. But you, the last Dragonborn, do have a legitimate claim to the Cyrodiilic throne as a Dragonborn. It's not like anybody's gonna say no to you. You are a Dragonborn. You'd be like Remen Cyrodiil marching into Cyrodiil with an army of Nords at your back. Of course they're gonna give the throne to you. You are the Dragonborn guy. It's like you'd be the second coming of Tiber Septim of Remen Cyrodiil, right? And then you'd march into Hammerfell. You'd probably get those guys back in line. And then the 4 provinces would probably march south into elsewhere. The Dragonborn flying on dragon backs with all the dragons and the shouts and all that. The Khajiit would just start bowing to you because of all their venerations of dragons. And then with elsewhere no longer being cheated and lied to by the Ultimary Dominion, we just have Valenwood. And we could just fly right over that with an army of dragons and go right into Somerset with the Dragonborn. You know, the Dragonborn could do a lot of things. The last Dragonborn is a very powerful entity. It took out Mirak. He shouts dragons out of the sky. He could bend dragons to his will. He could have an army of dragons at his back and send this army into Somerset to take it out. You know, it is... This guy could do a lot of things. This is why he won't. In Elder Scrolls 6, this is why, more than likely, the last Dragonborn, in canon, is going to disappear after going into Apocrypha to take out Mirak. He's going to disappear from history. We don't know what happened to him. The lore books are going to say, we have no idea what happened to this guy. He went in there to fight Mirak, and then he vanished. He may have come out, but we don't know where he went. And that's probably what's going to happen. That's just what happens to the other 4 previous player characters. So, the Thalmor is still a big deal. It is. The last Dragonborn is gone. He can't be the next Emperor. But there probably will be another Emperor. They might even elect one this time instead of one being just a conqueror. The council might just elect somebody to be an Emperor, and it might just turn into a democracy or something, and go from an empire to a republic or something. And they just... So... There are many ideas for what you could do with the Empire, but I do think that it needs to continue to exist. I do think that the cosmopolitan beliefs and ideals of the Empire as a nation, whether it's an empire, a kingdom, a republic, a democracy, it doesn't matter. The ideals of cosmopolitanism is too powerful for this type of Kalpic cycle of man versus mer. It's the big change. It's the big kahuna that keeps all of this Lorkhan and Oriel business at bay. You need the Empire to preserve Tamriel, to keep Man and Mer from destroying each other again. So of course I sided with the Empire to stop these silly Stormcloaks from causing and perpetuating the same fights that have been going on for thousands of years. It's time for a change. It's time to stop the battles. It's time to keep Skyrim in the folds of the Empire. Then we need to go get Hammerfell, make an alliance with them, and then we need to take out the Thalmor, and then we just go back to things being the way they were. Who knows what's going to happen in Elder Scrolls 6? Who knows? I have no idea. I have no idea what's going to happen in Elder Scrolls 6. Maybe the Thalmor are going to be even more powerful. Maybe Cyrodiil will be a shadow of its former self. Maybe it'll have been taken over. Maybe there will be a second Great War and Cyrodiil itself will be destroyed. Or maybe elsewhere will revolt against the Thalmor, and Valenwood would revolt against the Thalmor, because both the Bosmer and the Khajiit are seen as second-class citizens to the Thalmor, and eventually those types of tensions will get too strong. They will turn on them at one point. It's inevitable. It is. Valenwood and elsewhere being under Thalmor control has always been a temporary thing. It was never going to last forever. So maybe the Thalmor will be a shadow of their former selves as well by the events of Hammerfell. Year 6. But who knows what's going to happen? I have no idea, but I am curious. Either way. When you read a letter, there's a letter in the Thalmor embassy. You can read this, and it tells you about Ulfric and how the Thalmor are more than aware of him, and how they captured him and they let him go because they knew he'd be an unwitting agent for their cause. They turned him into this guy who wants to go against the Empire. They basically turned him into the rebel leader that he is. They knew exactly what he'd end up doing, so he's basically doing the Thalmor bidding from his position. You can believe that whether you want. You could believe Skyrim could probably defeat the Thalmor if you want, but realistically, without the last Dragonborn, Skyrim has no chance against the Thalmor by itself. They have no chance. They are going to be completely destroyed. And that's what the Thalmor want. Without the last Dragonborn and the dragons on their side, they are not going to survive. Which is why they need Cyrodiil. It's why they need High Rock. They need to stick together. Together in unity, there is solidarity, and you guys might survive. But alone, you will all fail one by one by one.